Hi, everybody. It's BJ Roach from the Humane Career Center. It is Thursday, and I am with Kate Axelsen Foster today. She is our Assistant Director for Employer Relations, and Kate will be with us answering three main questions about interviewing, specifically interviewing remotely. So that might be over the phone, online. So welcome, Kate.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, thanks for doing this. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, question number one. Can you talk about the different formats and the different platforms that students might be presented with when they're interviewing with an employer, especially since we're all working from home?
Yeah, certainly. So, since a lot of face-to-face interviews are moving to online or phone, students want to start practicing with us through mock interviews and interview coaching appointments to be prepared for those phone calls, to get comfortable talking about yourself. And it can be a little different because you don't have the other person reacting to you and your nonverbals. But the video interviews, there's a number of different platforms out there that folks are using. Some are using Zoom or Skype. Others have different platforms where they'll provide you with the questions in advance and you get to pre-record your responses. And you can sometimes delete and re-record as many times as you wish. I think what's important in general is to practice talking about yourself. And it can be really awkward. And some people are very afraid that they sound boastful if they're sort of bragging about skills or experiences that they've had. And so you want to get comfortable talking about and telling stories about times that you've done things that you're proud of and ways that you have developed and utilized your skills that are applicable to the jobs you're applying to. So I think there's a number of different platforms out there, but just working with us to practice that format, if it's phone or video, we can mimic that scenario with you. If folks want to send us their application materials and or the job description for which they're applying to, then we can really try to tailor the questions to be more realistic. But there's a lot of tips and tricks that our team can offer you. So
Absolutely. So again, students can call our main line. You can email one of our counselors, or you can just email the general email address of Humane Career Center at maine.edu, and we can set up a phone, Skype, or Zoom mock interview with you. Can you talk a little bit about behavioral questions? So behavioral interviewing questions. So a lot of interviews beyond, the technical skills, the employers are asking behavioral questions of our students. So maybe can you give some examples and some kind of tips and tricks as to how students can answer those most effectively?
yeah, certainly. So this is a very common type of interview question, and it's to allow the employer to get a sense of how you behave in situations, have behaved in the past, or would behave in a hypothetical scenario. Oftentimes you would be provided with sort of a case study, and they want to know, how does your mind work? How do you make decisions? How do you behave in a team? How do you solve problems? Think of a time that you've stepped up and been a leader. So these are types of answers that you can think about in advance. You want to learn the SAR method, which is something we all reinforce on our team and we practice in the mock interviews. So it's nice because instead of telling some long-winded story with all these tangents and irrelevant details, the SAR method is literally just an acronym. SAR stands for situation, action, and result. And so you can practice telling these short stories that have enough interesting information and relevant details that really highlight your skills that are most appropriate and would be needed in this type of job that you're applying for. So again, if you briefly describe the situation, give a little context, who were the key players, what were you faced with in terms of a problem or time and place maybe. The action is obviously what steps you took, what decision you made, how did you behave, what action you initiated. And then the result is the outcome. Whether it was positive, whether it was your desired outcome or not, if you can show reflection and self-awareness in this went the way I planned or this didn't go the way I planned and here's what I learned from it, that shows the employer that you are reflective and self-aware. So we can help you with that. But I think one piece of advice I frequently give is sort of imagine, I'm very much a visual learner, so I like to imagine pictures of moments in time with the key players. So was there a time when someone was a mentor to me? Can I, envision that moment with that person and think about who and why they were a mentor to me? And, it doesn't just apply to the behavioral interviews, but I think if you think of images, times you stepped up at work and provided excellent customer service, or a time you had to deal with a very difficult customer or colleague or whatnot. So again, it's storytelling and it's that keeping it brief but relevant. So situation, action, and result is the method to practice. And I think, again, they just want to know, there's not a perfect answer, but they want to know, how do you think and how do you behave? And in the end, how are you going to add value to their team? So always trying to tie it back to what you're applying to will help.
Awesome. Thank you. And the last question kind of surrounds professionalism, especially, interviewing from home, interviewing at a distance. What advice would you have for students regarding distractions, pets, what's in their background? How do they dress for, an interview at home that's maybe over the phone or over Skype or Zoom?
Well, certainly we're all faced with this challenge right now because most people are weren't working or learning online. So if you can remove distractions as much as possible, I have little ones and they've been in and out of the background of some of my calls. As much as I try not to have that happen, try to put yourself in a quiet space. If you need to have headphones on to focus, if you need to close doors or have a noise machine, maybe a fan sort of in the background to draw out background noise, try to be conscious of what's behind you. So if you're in a clean, neat space versus something that's very cluttered or has, for a student, not to make any assumptions, but like a poster that may not necessarily be professional or appropriate, what does that say about you? So think about what's in the background. Think about, preparing ahead to have a quiet space. When we reopen, we do have interviewing rooms that can be reserved, pardon me, but that may not necessarily be an option right now. So if you're at home with multiple kids, multiple partners, everybody just trying to use the computer and be online for different things, then be prepared to tell everybody else, I have an interview, I need it to be quiet, I'm going to hide myself in a corner of the house and do your best. And you can also be real with them. I think people right now certainly understand that we're all doing the best we can. And so if there is background noise, if you've acknowledged in the beginning that my child might need me and I'm going to do my best to not have that be an interruption, but sometimes honesty is appreciated. So
Absolutely. And do you have any recommendations as far as dress for interviews from home? Would you recommend that students dress the same way that they would when they're showing up in person?
I do. Thank you. I definitely do. Always dress to impress. So if you know that it's going to be a more formal setting, more of a, business professional environment, you want to dress the part or even a step up and really show them your best self. So be well groomed and think about what does that say about you? If you've done research on whether or not they have a dress code or what their expectation is in the office day to day, can you match that or rise above that? Definitely be careful if you're only dressing professionally, sort of from the waist up, but you're wearing SpongeBob pajama bottoms or something, because something could happen and you may have to respond to that child or that pet that's distracting you and get up and close the door and they may see that you're not
I
paying.
didn't even think of that. That's a good tip.
I've had that happen before with somebody else I was interviewing and he was so funny about it. I didn't acknowledge it, but he made a few jokes about it and said, I'm so sorry, this is so embarrassing, and it is what it is. But consider that. And if it's a phone interview, even though they may not be seeing you, we encourage you to dress professionally because it gets you into the zone, and we encourage you to smile while you're talking on the line because it shows, or you can hear the enthusiasm, and I think it also plays into a little bit of more of a confident voice. So consider smiling and dressing professionally even if they're not going to see you.
Great. Thank you so much. I just want to put a plug in for our interview coaching sessions as well. So we've talked in some of these videos about mock interviewing and that that's a choice for our students. Some students are ready to just jump right into a mock interview where, we meet with you, we ask you some tough interview questions, and then we'll kind of process it at the end. If you feel just very overwhelmed, if you have an interview coming up, feel free to schedule an interview coaching session with one of us, which is really where we just sit down and, if question number one is tell me about yourself, we'll give you that question and then we'll kind of troubleshoot and talk about it, and just go over some different scenarios and responses and then try it again. So it's much more developmental. It's more like a practice session, and our counselors can do either one of those options with you. So, okay, so I have my bonus question. You were not prepared for this one, but it's tough with our coworkers because I know so much about you, but I think this is the cool thing that students should know. So when you were in college, did you play any sports or were you part of any teams or groups, or what type of college student were you? What did you do for fun?
Sure. Well, I went out of state. I'm from Maine originally, and I left and went to a small liberal arts school called Roger Williams, and I kind of jumped into everything. I was really, I'm an extrovert. If you don't know me and you can't tell, I kind of jumped into a lot of different things. I played basketball, which was great. I loved it, and it was a fun experience. And I worked for admissions, so I got to be a tour guide. and I worked for them all 4 years of college. And I also did a few other things, like I was an RA for a few years. I worked in campus activities, helped plan like concerts and big events. And I really enjoyed all of the things I pursued. And I had some really wonderful mentors and advisors who kind of showed me that higher ed is a path that exists, and very fortunate. So, yeah.
That's cool. So I did some of the same things. I am not athletic at all. So there was no sports. I think it's really cool that you and Sam Wheeler on our staff were both basketball players. I was in a sorority. I worked for Team Maine, which is through admissions and new student programs on campus. I was also an RA. So I think a lot of those paths kind of lead people to higher ed, which is really cool. Thank you, Kate, so much for all of your expertise on interviewing against students. If you'd like to do a mock interview or interview coaching appointment, reach out to us. We're here for you. If there's anything you need, email us, call us. Have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks.